Hi again guys, and welcome to what is, for the moment at least, going to be the final episode of Featherweight Flyers, episode 10. Now, we may bring this series back in the future, because there are a couple of cars which are in the category which we haven't featured, such as a couple of the different variations of the Lotus Elise. But overall, I've covered the primary bases of the series, the strongest cars in the category, the most notable, the most different, the most unique. And as many of you would have probably guessed, we have left the best until last, the car which you are probably expecting every episode to be about, but it kept on not arriving. And the reason why is because, although I'm personally not a huge fan of this car, it has to be noted that it's a brilliant car, and by far the strongest in the class. And the reason why is very simple. The answer is what you get when you put the weight of the Caterham, the price of the KTM crossbow, the power of the Hummel Berlinette, and the power-to-weight ratio of a Le Mans car into an overall package to go up against the Lotus Elise and various other vehicles like that. Well, you get this car, the LCC, or Light Car Company, Rocket, a car which is very easy to underestimate. It's not a pretentious looking car, it doesn't have any flashy intakes or wings or special liveries or fancy names. Even the company itself is just called exactly what it is, the Light Car Company. Now, it's called the Rocket, and for good reason. It goes like one. And again, that's also for good reason, because this car was designed by the same guy who designed the McLaren F1, Gordon Murray. And it's an amazing sports car. Not the kind of car that you see every day by any means. Some cars in the series you do occasionally see, depending of course on where you live. Here in England you see a fair amount of Lotus Elises and VX220s. In other countries you'll see other stuff, I'm sure. This car you don't really see many of at all. They didn't build a huge amount of them, really, compared to the other cars here. And it's a car which is far easier, as I mentioned just now, to overlook. But what this car has to offer makes it a formidable opponent, especially within this series, but also beyond it. And I'm not just talking about in the realm of road cars. On Gran Turismo 6, this is a very strong performance car. Now, it's powered by a tiny engine, a naturally aspirated 1.1 litre mid-mounted engine. It's rear-wheel drive, as you'd expect, and it puts out some pretty serious power. Despite having one of the smallest engines of the series, it puts out a similar kind of power to the Vauxhall, the Lotus, the Ghuraya, the Tomicaira, 352 horsepower. Now, being a motorbike derived engine, it doesn't put out a huge amount of torque, 160 pound-feet, and even that is at 10,000 RPM. So this is an engine that likes to be worked hard. It's a screamer. The car is extremely lightweight. The only car in the series to outdo it in that regard is the Caterham. This car, though, still only weighs 390 kilos, which is insanely light. It puts out a massive 903 horsepower per tonne, which is by far the highest of this series, and the PP is, rightfully so, extremely high, 658. That is some serious PP territory. That is on par with a detuned Le Mans prototype or a higher end GT class race car, and also even some supercars, and all for the price of 100,000 credits, the same as a Motorsport Elise or a KTM crossbow. So what do you get for the money? We've established that it's ultra light, powerful for its engine size, and designed by a genius. Well, the performance does not let it down. The acceleration and even the launch off the line can completely embarrass most of the supercars in the game. And the top speed under its own power completely blows everything else in this series out of the water. In fact, the only thing that even comes close is the Tomicara ZZS, which also has a remarkably good top speed for its spec. The Tomicara can do around 225 miles per hour under its own power, which is phenomenal. That's far ahead of the Lotus, the Vauxhall, etc. This car, though, is as far ahead of that car as it is from the others. This car can do over 250 miles per hour under its own power. No NOS, no draft. And with NOS and draft, it can easily exceed 300, because it's got such a tiny amount of weight to deal with, and it's also a very aerodynamic car. Although it has an open wheel layout, the body area, especially the frontal area of the car, is very small. It's a cigar-shaped sports car with very little sticking out of the bodywork that isn't necessary. Even the headlights themselves fold away to make the car more aerodynamically efficient. And the look of the car overall is quite reminiscent of a classic or even vintage Grand Prix car. And I think that's pretty cool, even though I'm not a huge fan of the car itself. Now, this car does have some very notable rivals, most of which I actually prefer to this car itself, such as the Van Wall GPR V12, the Brook Double R, and various others like the Grinnell Scorpion, and even the Elfin Clubman. None of those cars are currently featured on the game, and all of them I personally prefer to this vehicle. But for now, this is the car that we have, and even if those cars were on the game, this would still be a very difficult package overall to beat. It has phenomenal straight line performance, top speed which is far beyond what a car like this would usually deserve, and the handling doesn't let it down either. You could easily expect a 250 mile per hour car to handle like an absolute pig around corners, but it doesn't, because even though it is light and extremely fast, it still doesn't have a huge amount of power to deal with. It's a very reasonable amount of power for a sports car to have, and that overall package makes it a formidable rival. So, as usual, we'll be starting a new series at the end of next week replacing this one, but for now, as always, thanks for watching.